You're listening to The Capital Table. Private capital markets have been evolving for many years, but never more so than in recent times. Take a seat at the Capital Table with leading experts discussing insights into the private equity and M&A worlds, and take away the knowledge you need to excel in a rapidly changing marketplace. We know this is one table you'll leave feeling full and satisfied.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of The Capital Table. I'm Steve Brady, partner with Witham and leader of our transaction advisory practice. We were recently at DealMax, and Witham was a proud growth champion of DealMax 2025. And my colleague Travis Loomis and I out there talked about beyond cost-cutting, unlocking transformative operational value. So welcome to today's Capital Table, where we're going to revisit this topic based on the discussions out there and certainly what we're seeing going on. So as deal dynamics shift and macroeconomic pressures rise, small and mid-sized companies must look beyond traditional playbooks to create value. As I said, Travis is joining me. He leads our operations and supply chain consulting team, advising firms through post-merger integration, operational scaling, and transformation. So, Travis, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks so much for having me. I mean, I think this is such an important topic, especially now in today's environment where strong operational execution is really crucial to long-term success.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with the big picture, Travis. And how is the role of operations and having an operating partner evolved in today's M&A environment?
Yeah, so historically, I would say operating partners were seen more as troubleshooters, brought in, post-close to cut costs and fix inefficiencies. But today, that approach really isn't cutting it anymore. Deals are sparse and very competitive, and hold periods are extending. And then you couple that with tightening capital conditions. Firms really need to generate real sustainable value through improved processes, stronger decision-making, and scalable infrastructure. And in fact, a stat I read recently showed that since 2010s, 47% of value creation has come from operations, which is up from only 18% 20 years back. And meanwhile, financial engineering's contribution to value creation has fallen to 25%, down from 51% in the same period. So you see that there's a major shift going on, and that's why more companies now are getting operating partners involved earlier in the deal cycle. So working with their investment teams earlier, helping shape how businesses are actually going to grow, and really not just how they slim down. And so we're seeing this shift from short-term margin optimization to more long-term operational transformation focus.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense, and certainly what we're seeing across our clients and friends in the private equity world. But many small to mid-sized businesses really aren't equipped for large-scale transformation. So, Travis, how do you start unlocking value without overwhelming businesses like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I mean, there's a lot of legacy systems there and a lot of unsophisticated business processes that sort of need to be unwound. So it really starts with understanding where are those root causes of friction for the business. Too often in our role, we see companies jump into new systems or large restructurings without really stepping back to ask, why are we really struggling with certain processes in the first place? Is it a lack of accountability? Do we have poor data management? Are the teams siloed? So only after you diagnose some of these issues should a tool or a new process really be introduced or re-engineered. So, for example, if a customer onboarding is inconsistent, the real problem might more so be a lack of standardized workflows as opposed to an absence of a sophisticated software. So a tool may support the fix, but it's not really the solution itself. Even more simplistically, if inventory is, getting lost or damaged or destroyed for some reason, buying more of that inventory is not the answer. there are several other reasons that, need to be hypothesized and diagnosed. And, that could be something as simple as putting in proper controls to track inventory, or really just understanding where in the process product is getting damaged. So finding the root causes of those areas of friction is really sort of step one in starting this operational transformation journey.
Yeah, it certainly makes sense, and it is a good place to start. But as you get involved in advising clients, early on, what are some of the most important actions you recommend post-merger?
Yeah. So the biggest things in the first 90 to 100 days are really clarity and alignment across the team. Companies need to, I think, really answer the question of how do we now operate? So that includes standardizing core processes like invoicing or procurement or even service delivery. And then those standardized processes need to be documented and then clearly communicated throughout the organization, so everyone is operating from the same set of rules and responsibilities. And it's not about overhauling everything at once. It's really simplifying where possible, freeing up leadership, bandwidth to focus on forward-looking initiatives and reducing redundancy in that sort of post-close integration world where possible. So again, where everyone is working from that same playbook, results will typically follow in that same direction.
Yeah, certainly. And, I know what oftentimes you see that tech adoption comes up early in the integration phase and mindset of those involved. So how do you guide companies through that without it becoming overwhelming?
Well, technology, there's so many tools out there right now, especially when it comes to automation and AI and advanced analytics. There's so many different options out there, but it's really not the first step in the process. It's really the enabler of something else that you've already identified. So the business needs should drive the decision of the tech adoption. So for instance, if a company is struggling with slow reporting, that may point to a need for better data consolidation efforts, not necessarily a whole new ERP. Or if team collaboration is breaking down between legacy systems and legacy teams, that may indicate a need for more of a unified communications group, not just new software licenses. So adoption becomes much easier when people understand why the change is happening. We always tie tools back to specific problems we're solving, and whether that's improving cash visibility, reducing manual errors, or enabling cross-functional accountability, it's really coming out of the diligence phase and stepping into that first 180 days post-close of saying, these are the specific problems that we've identified. These are the areas that we want to solve for, and here's why we're prioritizing them now versus later.
Yeah, those are great points. And, you mentioned cash visibility, and certainly along with that, small to mid-sized companies often don't have, an abundance of working capital, shall we say, and, big balance sheets. So, being able to keep cash flow going is so important. So how do you help them stay efficient post-merger?
This may sound pretty, basic and straightforward, but it's really just a lot of discipline and clarity on your core operating processes that, really focus on standardized billing cycles and procedures, payment terms, AR and AP approval workflows, sort of the basics and the blocking and tackling of any business, to manage working capital. But very often those are inconsistent, especially across newly merged entities, which can lead to obviously delayed collections and misaligned cash planning. So what we typically do is we review where capital is getting tied up unnecessarily. And that could be from, large swaths of inventory, or unclear procurement processes, handshake vendor agreements, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with, that haven't been renegotiated in years. And so tightening these areas can quickly improve cash conversion without needing to cut headcount or slash spend in various areas.
That's interesting. I mean, handshake agreements are, all too common, especially with long-standing important vendors or important customers. It can become part of the culture of the organization pre-close, and somewhat tricky to navigate because it's so personal to, the owners, the entrepreneurs who have these smaller companies. So how do you, kind of leads to how you manage culture in an integration?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. It is very personal, especially in the owner-operator founder businesses. So, transparency and continuity, really are key, especially in smaller businesses where, founders are long tenured employees who have worked their way up the ranks in some cases and often hold, deep trust with their customers, their vendors, their employees. So, sudden changes, especially without any, clear explanation or communication effort, can really cause a lot of fear and panic. And that can result in, unwanted or unforeseen customer, vendor, or employee turnover, which can, be a large, major business disruption. But the one thing that I always say is that, change is, a change can be scary, but positive change can really be contagious at the same time. And so when you are making changes, it's really important for leadership to communicate openly and define roles clearly and maintain continuity where it matters. And so sometimes that's, keeping a founder involved in sort of that transitional role or giving legacy teams more ownership in the new structure. It's really not about keeping everything the same. It's about understanding and respecting what's worked in the past while building something that's a more scalable infrastructure moving forward. And so when you have changes, it's crucial to find the right people to be on that journey with you from the leadership team on down, and have your floor supervisors or your project management teams, your project managers be on the journey with you, and have them be your champions at each level. So that way they not only are there to help mold what it looks like and have a say in the process, but they can also help celebrate the small wins and can communicate to the rest of the organization how those things were achieved, and can more clearly and consistently communicate why changes are happening to the entire team and why it's important to the growth and long-term value of the business. So, change management, super important, and cultural alignment from the top down and the bottom up is extremely crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. Change management, almost always underestimated, but certainly a core principle of effective leadership in any scenario. So let's switch gears a little bit here. And, many firms are outsourcing operational support. And why are you seeing that that's becoming more common?
Yeah. I mean, no one team can really be an expert at everything. That's a short but sweet answer, but especially in smaller deals. So outsourcing operation support can bring in very targeted expertise for things like, industry-specific pricing strategy, or digital transformation, or supply chain design, without the overhead or the bulk of having a permanent team. It can also bring a sense of neutrality sometimes. So external partners can sort of be the bridge communication between deal teams and operators, and sort of be sort of the punching bag and the good cop, bad cop role sometimes. But it ultimately is someone, that can help, make sure that everyone is aligned on the goals and really keep execution efforts focused across everybody. I would say that the best performing teams typically are using some sort of blended model where they have a small internal team that is supported by a handful or less of on-demand experts based on the needs of each deal. Additionally, we see a lot more buyers looking to embed advanced analytics, AI, and automation into their operating strategies. And so, outsourcing vendors who have that knowledge and expertise, and firms that are embracing these sort of tools, can and will have a significant edge in driving that transformational growth. There's a multitude of tools out there, as I mentioned, that can be highly effective in the first 3 to 6 months post-close, are low disruption and plug directly into existing systems and require little to no IT infrastructure changes. And can often be very scalable once it's proven out in the first, business segment or business line, and then can be expanded out to, other portfolio companies or future acquisitions along the way. So there's a lot of opportunity in terms of outsourcing. It's really just a matter of finding the right blend of what you want to keep in-house and internal, and what areas that you want to have some short-term quick win improvements to sort of drive the change quickly that you're looking to make.
Yeah, that's great, Travis, and certainly a great overview of unlocking transformative operational value. What are your final thoughts, Travis? I mean, what's the biggest single unlock that middle market companies need to look at post-merger?
I think it speaks to something that I mentioned before, which is, you need to have that operational clarity of when leadership is able to clearly define and communicate, here's how we now do this business. And that's, spans everything from back office support, from, finance to customer service to reporting to service delivery. Once you sort of got those building blocks in place, everything else typically becomes easier because you're working towards a very clear goal. You may not always take the most direct path, but at least you know what you're working towards, and everyone should know that and be able to communicate that clearly across the organization. So if you remove that ambiguity, decision-making becomes a lot easier and can be accelerated because you've really set the tone for what are we focused on for growth. And again, it's not going to be perfect from day one, but there needs to be a level of intentionality to everything. And the faster you can sort of have that vision and that clarity, the sooner the business can move from let's just get through this integration to let's accelerate our growth momentum.
Yeah, those are incredible insights, Travis. I really enjoyed continuing the conversation we started at DealMax, and for our audience, sure you found some great insights here. Travis, thanks for sharing such, I'll call it, grounded and practical advice for our audience.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to The Capital Table. For more information, please visit withum.com. Thank you for listening.